Let's start the third session from the fourth training module. In this part, we will talk about techniques for analyzing sexist discourses and language patterns. Sexist discourse often relies on fallacies and rhetorical devices to naturalize gender inequality, silence opposition, and reinforce stereotypes. In order to analyze and deconstruct sexist discourse, we need to understand how fallacies and rhetorical devices work. Ad hominem refers to attacking the person rather than the argument. For example, dismissing a woman's opinion in politics by saying she's too emotional instead of engaging with her reasoning. Strawman refers to misrepresenting an opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. For example, reducing calls for equal pay to women want to be paid for doing nothing. Appeal to tradition is claiming that gender roles should remain as they are simply because that's how it has always been. Appeal to emotion happens when someone tries to win an argument not by providing sound reasoning or evidence, but by manipulating emotions such as fear, pity, pride, or anger. Pause the video and read the examples. Appeal to authority, argumentum ad verecundium, is a logical fallacy where someone claims a statement must be true simply because an authority figure, expert, or influential person said it. It can be persuasive because people often trust experts or leaders, but it becomes a fallacy when the authority is not an expert in the relevant field. Authorities themselves disagree. The appeal replaces reasoned argument with mere deference to status. Pause the video and read the examples. Another fallacy is false dichotomy, which means presenting gender relations as an either/or scenario, excluding nuance. For example, either women focus on their careers or they can be good mothers, but not both. Hasty generalization is more common in sexist discourses, by using limited examples to justify broad claims about women or men. For example, one woman lied about harassment, so all claims of harassment are suspect. Other fallacies are slippery slope, which means suggesting that granting one right or equality measure for women will lead to extreme or absurd consequences. Naturalistic fallacies, which assume that biological differences justify rigid social roles and the false equivalence. The latter occurs when two vastly different things are presented as though they are directly comparable. Pause the video to read the examples for a better understanding of each concept. Next, we will present some of the most commonly met rhetorical devices. Stereotyping, or using oversimplified categories to reduce women to narrow traits, for example, nagging wife, hysterical woman, gold digger, humor and mockery, referring to sexist jokes or sarcasm used to trivialize women's concerns and discourage serious debate. For example, jokes about women drivers or about women not understanding technology, euphemism or masking discrimination in seemingly positive or neutral terms. For example, saying women are protected from certain jobs instead of barred. Tokenism, pointing to a single successful woman as proof sexism no longer exists. For example, we had a female CEO, so the workplace can't be sexist. The loaded language, using words with strong connotations to undermine women's credibility. For example, calling assertive women bossy while calling men leaders. Whataboutism, deflecting critiques of sexism by pointing to alleged disadvantages men face. For example, why talk about the gender pay gap when men die younger? Red herring is a rhetorical device in which someone introduces an irrelevant point or distraction into an argument to divert attention away from the actual issue being discussed. In sexist discourse, when women raise issues of discrimination, a red herring might appear as, why complain about sexism here when women in other countries have it worse? Beyond rhetorical strategies, sexist language is embedded in everyday linguistic choices. These patterns subtly reinforce inequality by shaping perceptions of gender, derogatory terms and slurs, diminutives and objectification, exclusionary language. Sexist language often employs slurs or derogatory terms like bitch, slut, sissy that demean individuals based on gender or nonconformity to traditional gender roles. Language can diminish individuals by infantilizing them or reducing them to objects. For example, referring to adult women as girls or using terms like girly. This implies immaturity or a lack of seriousness. Other expressions used to describe women, like eye candy, visually attractive, pleasant to look at, but lacking substance or depth, objectify women. Certain phrases suggest that specific roles, spaces, or activities are inappropriate for women or men. This can also emphasize stereotypes and form an incorrect perception of gender roles. For example, a woman's place is in the home. Boys can't play with dolls. Sexist discourse, in particular, often relies on rhetorical devices and linguistic patterns that demean, silence, or marginalize individuals based on gender. By critically analyzing these patterns, we can expose the mechanisms through which sexism is sustained and challenge the narratives that normalize inequality. Critical discourse analysis, a CDA, examines how language reflects and reproduces social power relations, especially gender hierarchies. Fallacy and argumentation analysis identifies flawed reasoning used to justify sexism. It spots fallacies like ad hominem, she's too emotional, appeals to tradition, women have always been homemakers, or false dichotomy, a woman can't be both a mother and a professional. Read the examples as well to understand each pattern better. Rhetorical device analysis, it looks at persuasive strategies, jokes, stereotypes, euphemisms that make sexism seem acceptable. Pragmatic analysis, implicature and speech acts, it studies what is implied rather than directly stated. It examines indirect meanings, silences, or presuppositions. Framing analysis, it looks at how issues are presented, framed, to shape interpretation. It asks, what aspects of reality are emphasized or hidden? Who is portrayed as active versus passive? Metaphor and symbol analysis, it studies figurative language that conveys gender bias. It identifies metaphors that naturalize inequality. Quantitative linguistic analysis, it uses corpus linguistics and statistics to reveal patterns in large data sets. Conversational analysis, turn-taking and interruptions, it examines interactional patterns in conversations. It is important to read the examples as well. Intertextual and historical analysis traces how sexist language draws on cultural traditions, texts, or discourses. It compares how similar phrases recur across politics, media, religion, etc. Silence and absence analysis looks at what is not said or whose perspectives are missing. It analyzes representation gaps in discourses. The examples will help you understand the concepts better, so read them. In practice, a full sexist discourse analysis usually combines these techniques. However, analyzing sexist language requires going beyond identifying individual words or arguments. It also involves deconstructing the broader narratives in which they are embedded. Key questions include: what assumptions underlie the statement? Which stereotypes are being reinforced? What power dynamics does the message attempt to justify? Here is an example on how the narratives in sexist discourses can be deconstructed. A political headline might read, "Can a mother really handle the demands of high office?" In this case, the assumption is that women's primary identity is as mothers, making professional leadership secondary or incompatible. The stereotype is that women are naturally less capable of managing stress or responsibility. The power dynamic shows that by framing women's gender roles as limiting, the narrative attempts to legitimize male dominance in politics. Now you can check your understanding by solving the next quiz. We prepared 3 scenario-based multiple-choice questions for you. Answer them and see if you need more information from this section. Click below to start. Let's go to the next topic.